and welcome. My name is Nicole Delaney, and you are listening to the Navigating the Wilderness podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the importance of holding on to the vision that God has given you for your life so that when things get tough, you are not tempted to go backwards or you're not tempted to seek your own solutions in the midst of difficulty, but you are still trusting the Lord and you're still moving forward in the things that He has for you. You know, when we walk into a wilderness season, often the Lord has already spoken to us about where He's taking us, or at least given us a glimpse of where He's taken us. God may have spoken to you about your next assignment. He may have shown you bits and pieces of where He's taking you, or maybe He gave you a vision for what you're going to be doing in the next season. Maybe He's given you a dream about it. Sometimes we have at least glimpses of where we're going, that promised land on the other side of the wilderness, but it feels far off, and sometimes it feels impossible. We don't know how we're going to get there. And it's part of the process He's leading us into, because there's so much He has to develop in us to be able to steward the things He has for us. A lot of times we don't see ourselves how He sees us, and many times we don't have the character yet to be able to steward that word. And so He needs to make sure that we have our hearts in the right place, that we have the character that we need to be able to walk that out with Him. And so when He gives you a glimpse into what He has for you, it's important that we don't forget that we continue to hold on to that even when it makes no sense. When you enter a wilderness, everything feels like it's going in the complete opposite direction. You might have a victory like the Israelites where they saw God deliver them from Egypt. They saw the Egyptians drowned in the Red Sea and they had that victory, but it's easy to forget once you enter the heat of the desert. You're going through the difficult places. It's easy to forget those victories that God has given you in your life and to see that you're headed almost in the opposite direction of where He's taking you. You're not headed in the opposite direction, but those trials and those temptations come and begin to test the word in our life. They begin to test the word that God has given you. And so it's important to hold on to that and that we don't fall into relying on our own abilities to get us through things, that we're continuing to rely on the Lord to direct our steps and to get us where we need to go. One of the things that was brought to my mind was when Moses was denied entry into the promised land. But I had always struggled with that passage where it said that Moses was not allowed to enter the promised land because he was disobedient to the Lord. The Lord told him to speak to the rock and he struck the rock instead. I knew that he didn't obey God, but for him to be denied entry into the promised land over a mistake like that didn't make sense to me until I went to Israel and I began to learn the geology a bit of the land. The first course I took in Israel was all about the geography and the geology and all these things. And I was never a very big science person. So learning about rocks, I was like, why are we learning about rocks? What is the importance of learning about the different kinds of limestone in the different parts of Israel? It didn't make sense to me. But when you begin to visit these places and then take the stories in context, everything starts to make sense. When I was in Israel, I learned that there is this type of limestone, I believe it's called Eocene limestone, that when the rains come in the wilderness, they do get some rain. It's not a ton of rain, but they do get some rain, and some of the rain will come into the mountains and then make its way into the wilderness. When the rains come, there will be water that comes through this porous limestone called Eocene limestone, and it forms a mineral cap. And when the mineral cap is formed, the shepherds can strike the rock with their rod and get water from that mineral cap that's preserved there from the rains. And so I learned that when the first time that God tells Moses to strike the rock, it is a supernatural experience because he's in a location in Sinai where there's granite. It's not the kind of rock that would collect water. It's the kind of rock that is not porous. So it's a miracle when Moses strikes the rock and water comes out. It shows the people this miraculous power that God is revealing Himself through this miracle. But when they go into the wilderness of Zin, where there's Eocene limestone and there's this mineral cap that's formed, Moses knows. He knows the wilderness well. He's lived in the wilderness 40 years before he even took the Israelites into the wilderness. So he knows where to find water. So the people are grumbling for water, and Moses is trying to figure out a solution. And God says, speak to the rock and let the water come out. Now, speaking to a rock and water coming out is a miracle. It's going to be a miracle for the people. They're going to see the glory of God in that, because that's an impossibility. You don't speak to a rock and have water come out. But Moses doesn't listen to the Lord. He gets frustrated with the people, and he takes his rod and he strikes the rock. He strikes the Eocene limestone where the mineral cap is formed and lets the water come out. It's not a supernatural event. It's not something that God's going to get the glory for. It's something that Moses knows. It's out of his own natural understanding, and he's following something that he would have known from his prior experience in the wilderness as a shepherd. He takes the glory from the Lord because of it, because he does something in his own natural understanding rather than what God said. And so sometimes in our lives, when we're faced with difficulties, we can be tempted to take matters into our own hands and do what we think we should do based on our own natural understanding rather than what God is saying. I was there myself a couple weeks ago. We had some challenges that were coming up, and many times what the enemy wants to do is whisper in your ear and tell you, oh my gosh, this is an emergency. You need to be able to handle this right now. You need to drop what you're doing and you need to just put all your focus on this right now. You need to handle this situation. And that was kind of what I was feeling, was that pressure to figure out a solution quickly. He's telling me everything's going to fall apart. This is going on and that's going on. He's basically having me project 6 months down the line where things are going to go. What did Jesus say when he was on this earth? He says, do not worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has sufficient troubles of its own. So for me to be projecting out what I think could happen 6 months from now is a bit ridiculous. But in my natural understanding and in my desire to self-preserve, right, I was tempted to try to figure out a solution in my own way. And the solution at the time that I was coming up with was, okay, let me do what I used to do. Let me go back to what I used to do. Let me figure something out. Let me find a solution and really abandon where God's taking me so I can go back to something that I'm comfortable with. And I realized what was happening because God started speaking to me. He's like, are you really going to abandon the vision I've given you? And he brought a passage to my mind. Actually, he brought it to the forefront many times over a short period of time. And I'm going to read that passage to you. It's a very familiar passage. And I want to read it in context as well, because I think it's important that we unpack it from the biblical context as well as how it's speaking personally to us in our own lives. It's Habakkuk 2, verse 2, which says, then the Lord answered me and said, record the vision and inscribe it on tablets, that the one who reads it may run. For the vision is yet for the appointed time. It hastens toward the goal, and it will not fail. Though it tarries, wait for it, for it will certainly come. It will not delay. Now, as a rhema word for me, it spoke something to me, but I wanted to make sure that I unpacked it sufficiently, because what happened was my friend had brought this passage up. Later that day, I heard it a second time, and then I heard it a third time. And then the next day I heard it twice. And then I think I even heard it once or twice after that in the next week. When I hear something multiple times, I know God is highlighting it for a reason, and I want to give it sufficient attention. But when God's showing you something multiple times, if you see a passage he's bringing to your mind many times in a short period of time, or maybe he's highlighting something to you over and over again, pay attention, no matter what it is, because God has something in it for you. He has a message in it for you. And so I pulled up Habakkuk, and I decided I would read the entire book because it's only 3 chapters. It doesn't take long to read. And it's interesting, the book of Habakkuk, because the book of Habakkuk is a minor prophet, but it's not like one of the other prophets in the Bible where it's more of a narrative. We're getting an inside look at Habakkuk's conversation with Yahweh. And so Habakkuk is a prophet living in the land of Israel, and he's living in a time when Israel has turned their back on the Lord. They're not following the Torah. They're not following the ways of God. And he sees this and he's like, how long, Lord, are you going to allow this to go on for? How long am I going to have to see this happening in my country? And God responds to Habakkuk, and he gives him a response that you wouldn't expect. He says, I see what's going on in the land of Israel. I see what's going on among my people. And here's what I'm going to do about it. I'm going to allow the Babylonians to come into the land. I'm going to allow them to take them captive and oppress my people. And they're going to be humbled through this experience and turn back to me. And Habakkuk takes issue with this because it's not what he would expect God to say, and it's not how he would do things. And so he says, what do you mean you're going to let the Babylonians come in? They're more wicked than our people, and you're going to let them come in and take captive our people and oppress our people? How is that a solution? And God's saying, no, I'm going to use them to humble my people and restore my people back to me, but I'm not going to allow it to go on forever. I will take out the Babylonians and I will restore my people. And he's telling Habakkuk, write this vision down, make it plain on tablets, tablets meaning stone tablets. It's a way of saying this is going to happen. Write it on tablets so that those that see it may run with it. That could have been the messengers that needed to run with the message. It could have also meant that it's for a specific time, and those people that are going to read it will know what to do with it when they see the message. And so he says, it's for an appointed time and it will come to pass, even though if it tarries, meaning even though if it takes a while, it feels like it's delayed, it's not delayed. It's for a specific time and it will come to pass. Wait for it. It will not delay is what he says. One of the things I took from this passage, I thought about what some of the things that we're experiencing in our own nation. We look on the wickedness and we get so discouraged by what we see. Even in the church, there's been so much exposure in the church that has been very disheartening. We see people that are not walking in the way of God. They're claiming the name of God when they're not walking in the way of God, and it can be very discouraging. And sometimes the solution that God has for things is not what we would expect. And it's the same that's true in our own life. Sometimes what it seems like when God says, hey, this is the vision I have for you. This is where I'm taking you. But then we look at what's going on around us and we think, this does not look like at all where you're taking me. This doesn't look anything like what you've said. Why does this feel like I'm going in the opposite direction? Well, it's part of the process sometimes of where he's taking us. And so it's important that we have a clear vision and a clear direction of what he's said. And so one of the things that I've done in my own life is I journal with the Lord. I journal the things that he says. If God is showing me something, I write it down. Anytime he shows me anything, it could be a dream I've had, I write it down. It could be a message he said to me, I write it down. If there's something he's showing me in the natural over and over again, I'll write it down. Like this word from Habakkuk, I will write it down. Hey, I saw this scripture. He mentioned it to me this many times this week. What is God saying in it? And then I journal with him and I ask him, Lord, what are you saying to me? What are you speaking to me in this season? I will tell you personally, when he gave me this passage, he's been revealing more things to me about what he has. A lot of times things kind of feel like puzzle pieces. I've had dreams 13, 14 years ago that he's just now highlighting to me and showing me how they're starting to come to pass. There's pieces that are starting to make sense that I did not understand 13 years ago. And I'm having to partner with him in that. And as I'm reviewing these dreams and then seeing the connections with other dreams and other things he said to me and dates and times and all of these things, it forms a picture. And I'm beginning to see a picture of what God is saying about the future in my own life. And so he said to me, write the vision, write this down. What is it I'm speaking to you personally? One of the things that I am working on right now with him is putting together the things that I feel like he's saying to me right now. What is it? What does that look like in the next year? What does it look like in the next 5 years? I don't know the exact time frame of all of it, but I will say that as you have a picture in the forefront of your mind when he's speaking something to you, only what he's saying, not what you want, but what he wants. When you have that picture and you have it in the forefront of your mind, it makes such a difference. And I'm a visual person. So for me, at least in the recent years, something I have done is I've put together a collection of pictures for the coming year. Here we are. It's now November. We're going into the new year very soon. If you follow the Jewish calendar, we're already in the new year. One of the things that I like to do now is to create a visual of the things that God is saying to me for the coming year, or the things that I feel like he wants me to focus on for the coming year. I know in the new age, there's this idea of manifesting on a vision board. That's not what I'm talking about. This isn't something like you're manifesting anything, but this is something where you are putting a visual together that's just easier to, for me, I'm a visual person. So if you have a visual, it's easier to keep it in your mind. You have this picture, and something is powerful about a picture. If you look at scripture, there's so many places where God speaks to someone and he says, look at this vision or write this vision down. He has dreams, he has parables, and there's imagery in these parables and there's imagery in these visions. And I feel like vision is so powerful. Something I've done in the last couple of years, like I mentioned, is I put together a visual of where God is taking me for the coming year. What is it he wants me to focus on? So early last year, it was kind of interesting. I think it was the first time I've ever done this, actually. In my journal, I put together this visual of what I felt like God was saying for the coming year, what he wanted me to focus my attention on. And he had put on my heart to go to Israel. He'd put on my heart to study in the land of Israel. And it seemed impossible. I did not know how it would even happen, but I felt like this is something I'm going to pray into. And I wanted a visual that I could look at, that I could pray into on a regular basis. And so I pulled out this magazine, Biblical Archaeology magazine, because I know it has pictures of Israel. And I was looking for some pictures that I could put in my journal, and I found some photos of Israel. But in the midst of flipping through that magazine, I came across an advertisement for Jerusalem University College. And when I found Jerusalem University College, I was reminded that they have summer programs that you can take at a discount. They're programs for audit, not necessarily for credit, but they have programs you can take just to learn. And I love to learn new things. So I thought, let me look into what summer programs they have. So when I went to their website, I saw that they had short-term programs available. You could study in the land of Israel and you could take a couple different courses and combine them. And these were actually 4-credit courses. And I suddenly got hopeful that maybe this is something I could do, because I had wanted to study specifically in the land of Israel. I didn't want to necessarily just do a tour, but I wanted to have a hands-on experience in more of an intimate setting, and that this sounded like it might be right up my alley. The very next day, I went to the passport office to make sure I had a passport ready. Of course, anything that you are doing with the Lord, you have to partner with him in what he's showing you. You can't just sit back and wait for it to happen. I had to partner with God in that I had to take steps towards this, right? I'm praying into it, but at the same time, I'm taking steps. I'm making sure I have my passport ready and it's up to date. I'm making sure that I have an application in, for example, and I'm praying into how do I get the finances to do this? If I hadn't put my journal together with these images in my journal of Israel and what I felt like God was saying to me, I would never have probably come across that program in time to be able to go to the land of Israel. And I really felt an urgency that I was supposed to go last year. And had I not done that, I might not have been able to go because, as you know, just a few months after I returned from Israel, the war broke out. And so I wouldn't have been able to travel at that point. So God knows. But I just love that he led me to do that at the time that he did. And I've been doing that now ever since. And this year, I had my journal. And of course, I had this podcast as one of my visuals. I'm going to start this podcast this year. I know that the Lord has told me to do this. And so I had created a visual of what I thought the artwork was going to look like. And I put that in my journal. And so I just want to encourage you with the coming year. If you're someone who's visual, even if you're not someone who's visual, maybe try this and see, is there something that God has put on your heart and you know he's spoken to you about? Begin to put together maybe visuals of things that you can pray into, that you can partner with him on in the coming year. I know people like to write goals down, and I do write my goals down. I write a focus for each area of my life. What is it that I really want to see in my family? What is it that I really want to see in friendships? What do I want to see in my spiritual life? Like, how do I want to grow with the Lord this year? What is it I feel like he wants me to focus on in my time with him? Those are things that I write down, but I do feel like having a visual is so helpful. And if there are things that maybe God has shown you in dreams, it's important that we write those things down. There's so many people I talk to that have dreams that never write their dreams down. And I'm telling you, like I said, I have a dream I'm looking at right now 13 years ago. If I hadn't written that dream down, I would not even have a clue what God was saying about where I'm headed right now. And I just encourage you, wherever you are in your journey in the wilderness, whatever it is that you're going through, that you take the time to steward the things that God has said, and that you're not tempted to take matters into your own hands. When things get tough, ask yourself, what has God said to me? Remind yourself, go over those things, go over those words, Refresh your memory. Pull out your journals. That's why I write things down. I pull out my journal. Whenever I'm struggling, I ask myself, okay, what is it God has spoken to me this year? What did he speak to me last year? I remind myself of the things he said, because there are times that it's going to get difficult and we're going to be tempted to just take the easy route. And God isn't asking us to take the easy route, right? He says, narrow is the way and difficult is the way that leads to life, and few will find it. If you've been in an actual Judean wilderness, it's interesting because the path is very narrow. You walk on this narrow road and there's cliffs along the side. You really have to keep focused on the path. So I just want to encourage you with that this week, that you keep the vision at the forefront as you're moving forward, that you don't lose heart, that you don't take the easy route, but you continue to hold on to the promise and partner with God in what he's saying, and that you take courage as you are moving forward, that you don't give up. So I hope that you'll take those things to heart, that you will pray into those things this week, that you will ask the Lord, what is it he wants for you this coming year? What is it he wants you to focus on this year? And put those things in the forefront. Write the vision down and make it plain. Trust that God will bring things to pass as you partner with him. So I hope this encourages you this week. I hope that you will share this with someone else that will benefit from it if you are encouraged. Please do like and subscribe if you are listening wherever you're listening, and I look forward to meeting with you again soon.